Good morning, church.
Good morning. I'm that excited.
I'm excited too. You know you have kids when you work really, really hard on creating yourself a bunch of note cards, only to pick them up and find little pieces of candy stuck to the back. But we love them anyways, right? Well, today, you guys are probably, I don't know if any of you guys are wondering, if it was me, I'd be wondering, what is this beautiful garden box, planter box doing up here? Because this isn't normal, right? And normally I'd be sitting in a chair with a podium or a little stool here or a table, and I'd be reading off my iPad, but I'm going to try something different. I'm going to go with note cards. I'm going back to my school age, and I'm going to try note cards, and we're going to see how well that goes. No guarantees. Hopefully, what we talk about this morning is going to be an enlightening experience. It's going to be something that's going to help each and every one of us. I know that as I sat and wrote this, it was something that really spoke to me. I've actually been working on this sermon for quite a while, quite some time, and every time I've gone to do it, the Lord's like, nope, not yet. Nope, not yet. This isn't the time. But I didn't get that response this time. I got, let's do this. So we're going to do that. We're going to be talking about the nature of offense. Offense is a common human experience. It's rooted in our perceptions and expectations. The temptation to be offended often arises when our expectations of others or of situations are not met. Look at that. My nerves are going crazy. I'm so excited about what we're going to do today. It's not nerves, it is excitement. Understanding that offense, meaning people do offensive things, is a natural part of life. It can help us navigate and mitigate the potential impact it can have on our relationships. We live in a world that is seemingly swimming in the deep end of the pool of offense. You guys understand what I mean by that? Let me explain it to you, because Sean needs to hear it. We live in a world that is offended that we're offended, or offended that you're offended. I'm offended that you are offended. There's a lot of things that are triggering, which is not one of my favorite words, but we live in a world that is offensive. We've talked in the past about how Jesus himself was offensive, right? By nature, because he was not the norm with the religious section of people and with the world. He came in and shook up everything. The world is broken. But dare I say that so is the church. I've heard a lot lately, I've heard people say a lot lately that they don't go to church anymore, or they don't go to church, period, because the people in the church are heavily critical. Christians are critiques. This is a two-part problem. First, we are called to point out the sin of other believers. But I want to emphasize that we are called to point that out to other believers. Also, pointing that out does not mean that we go and bash somebody over the head. It means that we do it in a way that is not embarrassing. We go and we talk to people. Hey, look, I see this going on in your life. I know that you're doing this, and man, maybe this is what's going on in maybe because you're doing this, this is why things seem like they're going wrong or they're chaotic. But we are not called to embarrass people. Secondly, Christians have become known for being pointed critics of others who don't think, look, talk, act, smell, dress, praise and worship, believe, or teach like they do. This is throwing me off. I apologize. I'm going to stand back here. Now you guys have something pretty to look at when you're staring up this direction, right? So absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, we want to give Jesus away to others. But how do we do that when the way that we are doing it isn't Christ-like? It's just something to ponder. Our mission, like we spoke about last week, is to go out and make disciples of all nations. That's biblical. That is Jesus' words, right? But how do we do that in such a way that doesn't close the door of people's hearts towards Jesus? I have known people And I'm sure that some of you have probably met someone that has been like this before too, that you go and you talk to them and they want to give Jesus away to you, but the way that they go about it is beating you over the head, or it's making you feel like you are just worthless or wrong or horrible. And it's not in a loving way. It's not a way that we can really receive it. It's more of a, nope, I'm going to start putting walls up. How do we do it in such a way that that doesn't happen? It starts with loving people right where they are. And when I say love, I mean that we don't become offended when they don't do things that we think they ought to be doing, or they do things that we disapprove of. We love them with the heart and eyes of the Lord. Every Sunday, what do I tell you guys at the end of service? That I love you guys and there's nothing you can do about it. Are we willing to have that same type of approach and attitude with people that we're investing in, that we're giving away Jesus to? You guys remember last week we talked about Pastor Mark Bain and how that one couple, I guess technically it is pastor now. They both got their degrees. I don't know if I told you guys that last week, but Stevie and Jenny Ortega. You guys remember how long it took? 15 years. Relationships bring down the walls in people's lives and create future opportunities to plant seeds. Have you guys ever, I think I've probably talked about it before, but you guys ever heard the story about the man somewhere in Asia he was a villager, and he would constantly, every day, he would go outside and he would water the same spot, the same barren spot of ground. And he did this for 5 years. He watered it and watered it and watered it, to the point where the people in the village started calling him crazy. What are you doing, man? You're wasting your time. Keep pouring water on this barren dirt. Nothing's ever going to grow. But what they didn't know is that he had planted a seed of a plant. And because of his faithfulness and his nurturing and his care and his relationship to that, and I know that sounds weird, but with a plant, with a seed, after 5 years, all of a sudden that plant sprung up. And not only did it spring up, it took off like a rocket. How many of y'all have ever seen bamboo grow? You could almost literally sit in one spot and look at a bamboo plant and watch it grow. It grows that fast, that rapidly. Are we willing to patiently and selflessly love others, so that whether it takes 2 weeks or 2 decades, we're going to be the rock of Christ in their lives until they are ready to step into faith and stand on their own? I'm just curious, wasn't in my notes, but I'm just curious, how many of you guys had people, that you had people praying for you before you ever came to faith? I'm one of those people. We have a book that the seniors pray over every Friday morning, which, shameless plug, every Friday morning there is prayer in this sanctuary at 8 a.m. sharp, and it is powerful. If you guys want to be a part of something, prayer moves. God moves through prayer. But they write names in this book. Pastor Josh Berkey, that was here just a couple weeks ago, his name is in this book. Josh, isn't your name in this book? Proverbs 19:11 says, "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense." So here's the consequences of unresolved offense. And I want to focus on the relationship aspect, because offense is that silent killer that creeps in when we don't realize it. Sometimes we sweep it under the rug and move forward without actually dealing with it. We'll just put that under there. Never existed. That's not dealing with it. Unresolved offense creates bitterness, resentment, and division. It hinders communication, stifles forgiveness, and can lead to broken communication and connections. I'm going to have my volunteers come up this morning. Everybody give Heather and Sean a nice little round of applause for volunteering. I want you guys to know that they had, when I called Heather and asked if they would be willing, there was no hesitancy. I didn't sense any in her voice, but they had no idea what they were signing up for until this morning. So, which is a reason someone could be offended. I'm not going to say it. And we talk about the church. We talk about us Christians and how we should treat those outside the church. But let's talk about in our own homes and in our marriages and relationships. Let's pretend for a moment that Sean and Heather are newlyweds. Married for a year or less. Okay? Can everyone see the planter box pretty well? Okay. This little garden represents all the love and potential a relationship has. So I'm going to give this to you, Sean. Just hang on to that for just a moment, okay? So these fence boards, they represent the offenses, just to get this out of the way, the offenses that are going to come into our relationships. You don't have to be married to get a lot out of this analogy, so this will apply to anybody. Any relationship that is important to you, this applies. And it'll show you exactly what the enemy will try to do. But married people pay attention to. So I'm going to share a story with you guys about how offenses can come, because the question isn't, are offenses going to come in your relationship? They are, right? The question is, what are you going to do with them when they do happen? That's what determines whether or not you keep a strong relationship with God and with others. So, a woman is at her in-laws for Thanksgiving. How appropriate. So, a woman is at her in-laws for Thanksgiving, and they sit down at the dinner table, and her husband is, we'll just say to the right. Husband is to the right, and mom, her mother-in-law, brings in the turkey and the stuffing, and she serves up the husband. And as the husband's sitting there, he's shoveling this stuffing in his mouth, and he's like, this stuffing is amazing, Mom. Nobody makes stuffing like you. Others try, but nobody can make it like you. The wife is thinking the whole time, and nobody's gonna make stuffing for you. You better invite your mom to be your cook, because I won't be making stuffing for you. See, the funny thing is it's a true story. And the gal didn't make stuffing for her husband for the next 6 or 7 Thanksgivings. So, you're going to have to bear with us. This is really going to take some fighting to get stuff in here. Nope, it goes down a little further. It's all right. We'll get him in there. So, you were a little premature on that, but that's okay, because we got plenty more. You are offensive. So I'm going to give you another one, Sean. Go ahead and leave it. Don't worry about it. We'll get it in there. It'll fit eventually. So, I give this to you. And I have you holding it because Sean is a man and says some unintentional but stupid things sometimes. We men say some stupid things, unintentionally, not meaning anything by it, but we still say it. Or sometimes it's not what we say, but what we don't do. An unmet expectation. That is the breeding ground of offense in relationships. Do you guys know what the breeding ground is for unmet expectations? Unexpressed expectations. So you've got to learn to talk to people. I'm going to come down here. So you've got to learn to talk to people. So let's say growing up, newlyweds, remember, okay? So let's say growing up, in Heather's household, birthdays were a big deal. Man, yeah. Mom made you special Mickey Mouse pancakes with blueberry eyes and a nose,
Very nice.
right? And Dad had some, Larry, I'm not throwing you under the bus, I promise. Dad had some special song that he would sing to you, right?
Yeah.
That was a chortle. But birthdays weren't a big deal in Sean's household. Maybe at Sean's house they didn't make a big deal about birthdays at all. Because hey, what did you do? You didn't do anything on your birthday. You were just born. So maybe Sean's house, nobody celebrates the fact that you just came out into the world like it was some great achievement. But Heather wakes up, and her mom used to make her pancakes for her birthday. Like I said, and her dad sang her this song. Sean wakes up, and his plan is to take her to dinner. Somewhere fancy like Outback Steakhouse, because it's her favorite place. But right now, it's morning time. It's like 7 a.m., and there's no pancakes, and there's no special song. Why are you hanging your head? You didn't know any better. She's a sad one. And now all of a sudden, it's their first birthday spent as a married couple. Sean wakes up, and Sean hands her an offense. Gives her a kiss and just goes to work. No pancakes, no song. It's easy for us to sit here and say, well, why is she so offended? How could she be so upset about that? What's the big deal? It's just a simple mistake. But we often, as human beings, get offended over some pretty petty things, right? We get offended over some of the little stupid things. I'm going to use that word a lot today, stupid. Because sometimes, it's later on afterwards, we smack our foreheads and we're like, man, why was I so stupid? That happens. But we get offended over some stupid stuff, little things. And what do we do with it? We hang on to it. And see, it won't just be you offending her. Let's say Sean is working really hard. Be careful, you might get splinters.
Okay.
Kid sanded, not parent approved. So maybe Sean's working really hard, right? And he's putting in all these hours. You're working your tail off. And maybe you guys had a conversation at some point. You're doing this, to try to help the family, and you're trying to pay off debt. You guys have talked about paying off debt. And she's like, okay, well then you can't go buy that new pistol that you want. And you're like, you know what? It's for the betterment of my family. I want to get us financially stable. Absolutely. You're willing to sacrifice. And so you come home, your wife's not home after a hard day's work. And not 5 minutes after you walk through the door, here comes Heather, arms covered in shopping bags. But those shopping bags don't look like shopping bags to Sean. You know what they look like? They look like grenades to be launched at their financial stability. And then Heather has the nerve to say something like, it's okay, because I bought them all on
Sale.
Makes it all good. So, Heather might have even told Sean that they couldn't spend any money. And then now he's sitting here and he's left with what? An offense. And every time he thinks about it, he tries really hard not to, but every time he thinks about it, it's just this constant aggravation and frustration, right? This is what the devil wants. And later on, Sean's trying to fall asleep at night after she's just handed you this offense. She wasn't trying to offend you. She was just shopping. It's her thing. But Sean is working hard. He might even think things like, doesn't she see how hard I'm working? And how does she expect us to get ahead financially? The last thing she needs is another set of heels. He might even be frustrated. How come I can't spend money, but she can't? How come I get in trouble when I spend $5 at the gas station, but you just spent $500 because it was 50% off. Oh, I got $1,000 worth of stuff, but now it's only $500. That makes it a good deal. I had to spend the money. I had to buy it because it was on sale. And the enemy is like, yeah, Sean, that's good. She doesn't care about you. She doesn't respect you. She doesn't care about your wants or needs. She doesn't appreciate you. Doesn't appreciate all that you're doing to provide for her. And it's just one little offense. Meanwhile, Heather's still stuck on her birthday. It was 4 months ago, Heather. It was just pancakes. She's still over here nursing that little thing about her birthday. And every time she thinks about it, she has to it just drives deep into her mind. And the enemy's like, yeah, you keep that up. That's where we want you. She's reliving it. You're thinking about what he said. You're thinking about what she did. And what they didn't say. He didn't pay attention to me. She doesn't appreciate me. And marriage is going to give you, because it's the most intimate relationship, an infinite potential for offense. So you're going to have a million little offenses. And if you don't learn how to deal with them, the thing you liked about each other when you were dating will drive you crazy now that you have to wake up with it every single day. Maybe Sean liked that she was so quiet and mysterious when they were dating. It drew him to her. Right? It drew you in. But Heather, why won't you communicate? Now that we're married, why don't you talk to me? And then Heather's like, man, I used to love the fact that when we were dating, he was the life of the party. He walked in, the room lit up, he brought joy. And now she's like, why don't you ever shut up? Sean, just shut up. It's easy for those things that used to attract us to our spouse when we were dating to slowly but surely, because of offense after offense after offense, divide us when we don't deal with them. Do you guys know how many couples go into premarital counseling with a pastor, and at the beginning of that, they're like almost in each other's lap, loving on each other and just so gaga for each other. But by the time that they get to the 1 year mark post-wedding, they're on the opposite ends of the couch, and they're aiming their eyes at each other and their mouths at each other like cannons to hurl insults. Do you know how frequent that happens? What is that saying? The first 2 years of marriage is the most difficult. This happens to a lot of people. An old preacher said once, before marriage, opposites attract. After marriage, opposites attack. Amen. And I know it's kind of heavy, but that's the nature of offenses, right? They're heavy. And they don't always happen all at once, right? We don't just get this pile. We don't get one. Or we get one at a time. And they start piling up and piling up and piling up. Next thing you know, you're asking things like, why won't you tell me what's on your mind? Like I said before, that was an attraction. Now you're driven nuts because he won't stop talking. He's so kind and courteous and talks to everybody, but man, he just doesn't stop talking. So what was actually a part of the building block of your original relationship is now an offense. It happens a million different ways. The enemy will give you all kinds of opportunities and you don't realize what's happening because it's just one conversation after another. It's just the dressing on Thanksgiving. It's just me trying to tell Ashley how to drive. There are a lot of marriages that have dysfunction in them simply because of what happens while we're in the car.
Backing a trailer.
Yup, been there. It's okay. Ashley can't find her way places, and I just can't drive. Thank God for GPS and Google Assistant. But see, offenses, that's how they work. Offense by offense. If we don't know what to do with them, the enemy would just love one conversation after another to go sideways. We don't make... How many of you guys have ever known somebody that looked like they were just this happy, amazing couple, and one day you get a text and you're like, hey, so-and-so and so-and-so are getting divorced. They've split up. You don't make a decision to just walk away from a relationship. You don't see them becoming your enemy, like Jesus talks about in Matthew 5:25. I'm going to read that to you. It says, settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. It's just one unacknowledged effort after another, and the next thing you know, you're thinking, I'm the only one who ever takes out the trash around here. I guess I'll do it again like always. No, it's all good. I got it. I would love to get up with the kids again in the middle of the night. I know you have to work. And now what started as just a small offense is now offense. What God joined together is separated because of
An offense.
And now the crazy thing is, Jesus said if you let it go to this point, if you live your relationship life on the basis of, I'm not apologizing first this time, I did it last time. If you don't learn how to deal with these things and you find yourself angry all the time, you find yourself stressed out in your relationships, you're living in a prison when you don't figure out how to deal with them. But it's important to point out that it's not them that put you in prison. Hey, Sean, why don't we talk anymore?
Well, you never call, Pastor.
Where did the love go? We haven't been to the Outback Steakhouse in 3 years, Sean. You built a fence. The enemy's agenda is destruction. His strategy is division. And his tactic is offense. Thankfully, God has given us another way to deal with offense. If only we could find an example of somebody who had every right to be offended, of somebody who had every right to hold it against us, of somebody who had every right to stand at a distance, but opened his arms and said, this is the way of relationships. It's very simple what we have to do. If we're going to get back to where we were, we're going to have to learn. And watch, this is very important. It's very profound. You ready for this? We're going to have to learn to put it down and drop it. I don't mean suppress it and not deal with it. It happened. But after you have a conversation, Sean, I like pancakes on my birthday. Then drop it. This has to happen immediately because you can't always control what is handed to you, but you can control what you do with it. You're not ready yet. Come on, Sean. Now, it's not one-sided. The enemy wants you to drive it down deep and stew on it, right? But God says,
Put it down.
drop it. Matthew 5:23-24 says, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, have your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. We can't be in a right standing relationship with God if we're holding on to offense. Unless we drop it. Every time that we pull this out, I want you guys to say drop it. We got 2 more. Can you guys do that for me? Participation. The Lord wants us to do what? What do we got to do? What are we going to do when our partner doesn't acknowledge you or doesn't notice you like you want them to? That's one thing. The point, guys, is that we live in a place in our faith and in our lives, just in our lives, that we get offended so easily. And how much more sensitive are we in the most intimate relationships we have? With our spouse, with our children, with our parents, with our closest friends? How easily are we offended? And again, I'm not saying that we have to just drop it and never deal with it. We're not talking about sweeping it under the rug. We're talking about have the conversation. And Ashley and I's marriage, when we talk, when I do something that is frustrating to her, let's be honest, that's more times than she does anything to frustrate me. When I do something that frustrates her, she stops me and she talks to me. She doesn't talk down to me. She doesn't yell at me. She doesn't scream at me. She says, hey, I want to bring this to your attention. You said this. or you didn't do that, or you did this, and you hurt my feelings. And it opens the door for us to have the conversation. Thank you, Heather and Sean. What are we going to do when our spouses don't acknowledge us like we want them to? What are we going to do when our spouse doesn't show us the attention that we think we need? We don't get the love and affection the way that we want it. Even when we know that they're trying as hard as they can, what are we going to do with it? Being in a close relationship is not about how quickly you can get offended, but how quickly you can get over it and drop it. Ephesians 4:31 and 32 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you." It takes choosing forgiveness. The Bible encourages us to forgive others just as we have been forgiven. Choosing forgiveness doesn't mean dismissing the hurt, but it releases us from the bondage of resentment. Jesus exemplified forgiveness, even in the face of great offense, setting a powerful example for us to follow. Colossians 3:13 says, "Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you." And the last element, we kind of touched on it. Communication and understanding. Open and honest communication is key to resolving conflicts and preventing offense from festering in our relationships. I used to be that guy. I used to be that guy that held on to everything that my wife did that frustrated me. And no, honey, it's fine. Well, just do what you want to do. And inside, I'm getting angry, and it's storing up like a volcano ready to erupt. And on the outside, I look like Mount Hood. I'm good, cool, and calm. Until one day, there's an earthquake, and the volcano gets set off, and I'm exploding. I don't know if any of you guys can relate to me, but that's who I used to be. We can't let it get to that point. When we talk through things with our spouse, or with our siblings, or with our children, or with our friends, or with our bosses, or our coworkers, whoever we're closest with, in those relationships, if we talk through things, it never gets to the point of an earthquake. Neither of you have the opportunity to store it up like a volcano ready to erupt. It doesn't get to that point. We have to take the time to understand the perspectives and motivations of others. And we have to foster empathy and bridge gaps in relationships. Do you guys understand that? I had somebody say this, and I think I told you guys this before too, but I had somebody say not too long ago that they don't come to church anymore because the last time they were in church, they were hurt. And I told them, I would love to have you in our church, but I can't promise you that nobody here is going to hurt you. There isn't a church out there that can promise that. Hurt happens. You know, Brother Jared, you were talking about it. You talked about it in between songs, right? People hurt people. It happens. It's part of relationships. But how we respond in that moment is what defines us. It's what defines our faith. Are we the same in every circumstance, in every situation, in every place that we go, in every conversation that we have? Are we the same, or do we change? Proverbs 18:13 says, "To answer before listening, that is folly and shame." Sometimes we get to that point, right? In our marriages, our spouse is talking to us, and they're telling us about their grievances, and we're already sitting here. We're not really listening. We hear them, but we're not listening. We're sitting here thinking about the comeback, right? Am I the only one? Is that really listening, though? Perfect example with your kids' conference. Corbin found Caleb because he heard him through the noise. He went almost right for him if Caleb wasn't moving around. But he heard his voice. That's truly listening, right? He heard all the other noise being made, and I bet you he couldn't tell you one thing that anybody else said. But he truly heard Caleb. When we are talking to our spouses, is it just wah, 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 wah? Or is it, you did this, and you hurt me in this way, and this is why I'm so hurt? And do we hear that? And do we consume it and chew on it and respond appropriately? Or is it just standing behind a fence? Like you're ready for battle. That's what kingdoms do, right? All throughout the storybooks and the movies and history, there's been this wall around the kingdom. Sometimes I think that as human beings we do that, right? We put up those walls for what? We try to protect our hearts. But when we have walls up like that, nobody can get in, including the Lord. Did y'all hear me? Nobody can get in, including the Lord. Specifically with marriage, sometimes it means throwing ourselves on the Spirit. Humility, humbleness. You know what? I don't necessarily agree with you. But I know that you're saying that I hurt you, and I don't want to do that. So I am sorry that I did that, and I'm going to do my best to never do that again. Can you forgive me? When we practice humility, it allows us to navigate offenses with a spirit of reconciliation. Ultimately, by embracing forgiveness, fostering understanding, and building resilient connections, we contribute to relationships rather than drawing from them, rather than just withstanding them. We then become people who withstand the challenges of offense, because whether we like it or not, offenses are going to come in our closest relationships. Our job is to not take offense at them, to drop them, and make every effort to remain united. 1 Peter says in 4:8, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. I'm just going to leave you with that. Let's pray.